Okay, how's it going, everybody? I hope you're all doing well. Okay, so in this episode, I thought I'd try to say something about the Russian-born writer Ayn Rand. She's of course best known for her two big books, The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. And she's also known for her philosophical system called Objectivism. Okay, where should I start? Well, I think it's pretty safe to say that what Rand does is she glorifies great individuals. And I say individuals because what I mean is that she exalts those strong few who do things alone, independently of and in isolation from all other people. Really, for her, there are basically only two classes of people. There are the few great, prime movers like John Galt of Atlas Shrugged, and then there are the rest of us. The rest of us, Rand says, we lead second-hand lives. Actually, Second-Hand Lives was the original title that she had for her popular novel, Fountainhead. Her editors didn't think that would be the best idea for sales, though, and she dropped it. Anyway, now, here's a question. In her seeming disdain for the masses, in her praise of these great achieving individuals who do things alone and in their own way, does she remind you of anybody? Well, I don't know. How about Nietzsche? I mean, here's the thing. The fact of the matter is that when she was young, Ayn Rand was clearly influenced by Nietzsche's writings, even though it's got to be said that she never truly owned up her debt to him. As a matter of fact, it's even worse than this. When she got famous, it seems that she actually got rid of the Nietzsche passages she had in her earlier works. Anyway, we know of this influence because we have proof of it in her personal notes written when she was in her 20s or so. In these notes, she mentions Nietzsche numerous times, she quotes him occasionally, and she even uses his idea of the Übermensch. And actually, she later adds to this in a 1961 interview where she says that the first book that she read of Nietzsche's was Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and that what excited her most about it was the individualist part of it. She said in this interview, I hadn't expected that there existed anybody who would go that far in praising the individual. Okay, so this might raise the question, what exactly does Nietzsche say about individualism? And so, does Rand get Nietzsche right here? Well, to begin with, what's certainly clear is that solitude and independence were at least characteristic of Nietzsche's own personal life. I mean, after leaving his university position at a very young age, he basically spent the rest of his very short life alone, traveling in and around the Swiss Alps and northern Italy. As he purportedly told a friend, he said, I go into solitude so as to not drink out of everyone's cistern. But more importantly, of course, what's undeniable is that in his philosophical writings, there are an abundance of passages concerning the importance and virtues of independence and of solitude. I mean, we can find them in works like Schopenhauer as Educator and Beyond Good and Evil. But it is perhaps the book that Rand referred to, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, which is most revealing in this regard. I mean, in this work, physical solitude is clearly one of the central motifs explored, and Nietzsche seems to, for the most part, be emphasizing its positive and constructive aspects. I mean, this is what Nietzsche writes about his central character. He says that Zarathustra left his home for a solitary life in the mountains where he enjoyed his spirit and his solitude, and for 10 years did not tire of them. And when he returns, Nietzsche goes on, Zarathustra has been transformed. He has become a child and an awakened one. So the idea here, and elsewhere in his works, seems to be that solitude as separation from others is crucial for the development of self-awareness and self-transformation and even personal greatness. So I think it's safe to say that Nietzsche is not really endorsing much in the way of community or collectivism here. Actually, it's the masses who often get in the way of personal growth. Nietzsche makes this explicit. He says that it's the marketplace that presents the greatest danger to a rarefied and exceptional existence. As Zarathustra is made to say, where solitude ceases, the marketplace begins. So Nietzsche then clearly embraces individualism and at times also contempt for ordinary human beings and social relations. Now, I think that there is some of this spirit in Rand. There is some contempt for the masses, and there is this emphasis on a kind of aristocratic individualism. Somewhat like Nietzsche, she seems to care most about the great and the exceptional, and she hates it when they're in any way suppressed by the lower meddling and so-called parasitic class. But that said, it seems to me that there's also a huge difference between the two, between Nietzsche and Rand, when it comes to solitude and individualism and the cultivation of so-called greatness. You see, for Nietzsche, individualism has nothing to do with industrialist heroes. Rand's usual band of characters. As one commentator puts it, the Übermensch is categorically no businessman or committed entrepreneur. He's no John Galt or Howard Rourke. No, in fact, for Nietzsche, capitalism and the celebration of money was just vulgar and superficial, and energy invested into it was a waste of precious life. He would look at Rand's heroes or protagonists and see nothing but cultural, artistic, and philosophical emptiness. Okay, but let's explore these things in a bit more detail here. And let's start with this issue of money first. So how exactly does Rand view money and its importance? Well, to be fair to her, I know she doesn't see money as in any way intrinsically valuable. It's no end in itself, in other words. It's not the change the miser hoards and protects under his bed. No, she recognizes it as the means that it is, and so she sees that its value is tied to its use, its trade value, and its productive input. But this said, though, she nevertheless does seem to have a preoccupation with it, at least symbolically. In Atlas Shrugged, the symbol is not the cross, but it's the $sign. And what it signifies by Galt and the others is basically real achievement. In other words, money is the sum of what's finest in human beings for her. And by the way, another interesting anecdote. Apparently, Rand's coffin also bore a 6-foot flower arrangement of the $sign. Anyway, so what would Nietzsche think about this kind of stuff? Well, most people know that Nietzsche was no fan of socialism. But what many people don't know is that he was in many ways just as critical of capitalism and of money-making. You see, for him, as I intimated, it's not money creation that matters, but it's the creation of art and culture and just thoughtfulness. That's the task of humanity. Money-making gets in the way of all that. And it's not just that money stands in the way of artistic creation, but according to Nietzsche, money also promises false security and psychological comfort. Like God, money is just a false ideal, promising solace and security and happiness. But this is false for Nietzsche, because among other reasons, nothing is permanent and nothing is secure. Life is just becoming. It's better to accept that and to live like a free spirit and truly get quality out of life than to spend your time shoring up money for this security that's ultimately unattainable. And actually, speaking of spending our time shoring up money, this leads us to a related topic, namely work. I mean, if making money is the goal, then we have to spend our life working, right? Now, many people, including Rand, think that working like this is good. It makes you strong and it's self-developing, they say. But here's the thing. Nietzsche sees this kind of talk as insincere. For most people, work is actually a kind of hiding, he says. It's an escape or a distraction from yourself. It's a forgetting of the self. Actually, there's a great passage that comes to mind, and it's worth quoting it in full. This is what Nietzsche says in the Dawn. He says, "Work uses up a tremendous amount of energy, and it takes it away from reflecting and brooding and dreaming and worrying and loving and hating. It always sets up small goals before one's eyes and permits easy and regular satisfactions." You get the idea. Okay, well, so what's the upshot of all of this? Well, to go back to the beginning, Nietzsche's Übermensch is no capitalistic, money-making, hard-working engineer or entrepreneur. This, if anything, is to reduce and to neuter Nietzsche's nebulous but profound vision of things. Zarathustra is just no Galt. The successful businessman is not the paradigmatic hero. The sign of the dollar is no symbol to be worshipped. No, the highest and the best has absolutely nothing to do with money and monomaniacal industriousness. No, what's highest and best is reflection and virtue and art and dance and spirituality. These, to quote Nietzsche, are the things for whose sake it is worthwhile to live on earth. Okay, well, so I did want to mention one more thing. And actually, this has to do with the only philosopher that Rand actually credits as being indebted to. And you know who that is? It's Aristotle. You see, a large part of what she likes about Aristotle, apart from his rationalism and his commitment to the sciences, is his view that the good life is the happy life. In other words, she follows Aristotle in taking the goal of one's life to be one's own personal happiness. This is why, in one of her letters, she called him the father of individualism. And again, this is because apparently he was the first philosopher to make this goal of personal self-fulfillment and happiness explicit and imperative. Rand then uses her view of Aristotle here and models her own commitment to individual happiness around it. Okay, but here's the thing. There's a slight problem. I don't think it takes a lot of work to see that Rand misinterprets or just distorts Aristotle's eudaimonism, or his view of happiness. To call him the father of individualism, well, that's just too reductive of a view, I think. You see, when Aristotle talks about happiness, he takes it to be a much broader concept than one that has to do with some kind of narrow self-interest. No, happiness for him emphasizes a much more balanced personal fulfillment, one that takes into account a much wider range of human interests and commitments, such as ones having to do with friends and family and society at large. Maybe another way of putting all this is that Aristotle's account of happiness is formally self-interested, yes, which is the same for all ancient Greek philosophers, by the way. But substantively, it's not. And that's because he thinks that what makes us happy is, in strong part, a commitment to a concern for others. And, You know, I've heard Rand say many times in interviews how disgusting and how evil altruistic acts are, and how they run up against our own real imperative, our personal happiness. But here's a funny thing. You see, I'm not sure how much Rand actually read Aristotle in detail here. But for someone who claims to model her view around his, it is very strange. It's very strange because what Aristotle does is he spends a significant amount of time in his works talking about not just the non-instrumental value of genuine friendship, but he also says that real friendship means sacrificing one's interests for another person. It can even mean to die for them, he says. In other words, something as evil and as disgusting as self-sacrifice, according to Rand, is actually, for Aristotle, a part of and the highest testament to a good and a happy life. I don't know, at the end of the day, there's something extremely axiomatic and dogmatic and maybe even shallow about Rand's philosophy. To say that everything's about reason and self-interest and industry, it just doesn't do justice to life's depth and complexity. And it certainly doesn't accord with the ample facts about the parts of our nature that are marked by philanthropism and altruism and empathy. You know, on that note, I'm not sure how accurate this is, but I read somewhere that Ayn Rand wasn't the kindest person to be around. And that at the end of her life, she hardly had any friends left at all. Now, here's the thing, maybe she didn't care, but she could have hardly been surprised, right? I mean, what do you expect? When you hold to a philosophy that centers on the self to the exclusion of others, what could possibly be in store for you but isolation and loneliness? Bye for now.